Hey guys, today I bring you an incredible story. Axel Ridgeway, a firefighter who dedicated decades to saving lives, went through a near-death experience that revealed secrets about death that we all need to know. What he saw will leave you speechless. So leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any content. Get ready for a breathtaking journey. My name is Axel Ridgeway, and for more than 2 decades I served as a firefighter in Santa Cruz, California. When I reflect on my journey, I see clearly that my life has always been guided by a deep sense of duty and a courage that, honestly, sometimes bordered on recklessness. But it was that same courage that made me walk into burning buildings when everyone was running in the opposite direction. I always believed I was born to do this, to serve, to save lives, to make a difference. The fire department uniform was not just work clothes. It was a fundamental part of my identity. Each emergency call, each successful rescue, each life saved reinforced this conviction. The adrenaline coursing through my veins during the rescue operations was like a constant confirmation that I was on the right path. My professional colleagues became my second family, and the corporation, my second home. I spent more time in the barracks than at home, and my wife often joked that I was married to work. However, fate had other plans for me, and in 1994, I experienced something that would completely change my perspective on life and death, an experience that made me question everything I thought I knew about our existence. Today, at 62 years old, I feel it is my responsibility to share this story. It's not an easy story to tell, and I know that for many it may seem difficult to believe, but I can guarantee that every word I will share is true, engraved not just in my memory, but in my soul. What happened to me that year wasn't just a near-death experience. It was an awakening to a reality far greater than we could ever imagine in our limited earthly existence. It's a story about life, death, and what exists beyond these concepts that we think we understand so well. A story that begins with a seemingly routine emergency call, but which turned into the most transformative moment of my life. It was a seemingly ordinary Tuesday when we received the emergency call. The sky was cloudy, and there was a strange feeling in the air that I couldn't define. The radio crackled with the dispatcher's voice reporting a seriously ill woman in need of immediate rescue. As always, our team responded promptly, without hesitation. At that time, we had no idea of the invisible danger that awaited us in that seemingly normal house in a quiet neighborhood of Santa Cruz. When we arrived at the scene, we found a critical situation. The patient had a very high fever and presented symptoms that, at the time, we were unable to fully identify. The air inside the house was thick, and something told me that this was not an ordinary case. Following protocol, we provided first aid and transported her to the hospital. It was during this rescue that I was exposed to the virus that would change my life forever. In the following days, I started to feel the first symptoms. First, an unusual fatigue that I attributed to overwork. Then came the high fever and pain that seemed to consume every cell in my body. I resisted as long as I could, trying to convince myself that it was just a bad cold. I kept working, even when my body was begging for rest. But when I started coughing up blood, my wife Sarah insisted I get medical help. At the hospital, doctors soon realized the seriousness of the situation. My organs were beginning to fail, and my body was fighting a desperate battle against a microscopic but lethal enemy. The hours turned into hazy days of pain and medication. The doctors did their best, but I could see in their eyes that the situation was critical. Then, on a particularly difficult night, I felt something fundamental was changing. My consciousness began to expand in a way I had never experienced before. The exact moment it all began is etched in my memory with surreal clarity. I was lying in the hospital bed, connected to several devices that monitored my vital signs, their constant beeping marking the rhythm of my fight for survival. The pain that had been consuming me for days began to subside, not because it was getting better, but because something much deeper was happening. First, I noticed a change in my perception of light. The colors in the room started to become more intense, more vibrant. The white of the hospital walls took on an almost luminous quality, as if every surface was alive. Then came a feeling of indescribable lightness, as if all the weight of the physical world was being gently lifted from my shoulders. It was as if someone had opened a window in a room that had been closed for decades, allowing fresh, invigorating air to enter. It was at that moment that I realized I could see my own body in the hospital bed, as if I were floating a few feet above it. There was no fear, no panic, just a deep sense that everything was exactly as it should be. I watched as the doctors and nurses rushed into the room, responding to the alarms on the monitors. I could see their movements, hear their voices, but everything seemed distant, as if I were watching a scene from a movie. The most surprising thing was that I could perfectly understand everything that was happening, but I no longer felt connected to that body in the bed. It was as if I had discovered that I had lived all my life in a small closed room, and suddenly the walls had disappeared, revealing an infinite universe around me. My consciousness expanded in a way that earthly words cannot adequately describe. At that moment, I understood that what we call self is much vaster and deeper than our physical body. After the initial separation from my body, I was drawn to a gentle but irresistible force. In front of me appeared what many describe as a tunnel of light, but that description doesn't do justice to what it really was. Imagine a corridor made up of millions of luminous points, each pulsing with a life of its own, creating patterns and shapes that defy any known geometry. The walls of this tunnel were not solid. They were composed of a vibrant energy that seemed to respond to my thoughts and emotions. As I moved through it, I experienced a sensation of incredible speed, but at the same time, there was a deep peace and an absolute certainty that I was safe. The most extraordinary thing was that, as I progressed, I began to realize that I was not alone on this journey. There were other presences around me, loving energies that guided and comforted me. The tunnel wasn't dark or claustrophobic. It was a living, pulsating space, full of colors that don't exist in our physical world. Some of these colors were so deep and complex that our human language has no words to describe them. It was as if each color contained stories, emotions, and universal truths. The lights danced and moved in time with silent music that I could feel in every fiber of my being. During this passage, I began to feel an expansion of my consciousness. It was as if each moment contained eternities, and each movement revealed new dimensions of existence. Time, as we know it, simply ceased to exist. There was no past and no future, just an eternal present full of infinite possibilities. At that moment, I understood that I was experiencing something that completely transcended our physical reality, something that few have the privilege of experiencing and returning to tell about. Emerging from the tunnel, I found myself in a space that transcended any earthly concept of place. It was a dimension of pure light and consciousness, where thoughts and emotions instantly became reality. It was there that I first saw them, the beings of light. They were entities of indescribable beauty and purity, radiating a love so deep and unconditional that it made me understand that all the love I had ever experienced on earth was just a pale reflection of this superior reality. One of these beings, in particular, approached me. It was taller than the others and emanated a golden light that seemed to contain all the wisdom of the universe. He had no defined human form, but he could perceive his presence more clearly and real than anything he had ever experienced in physical life. When he communicated with me, it was not through spoken words, but through a direct transmission of thoughts and emotions. "Axel," he said, and in that moment I understood that he knew me completely, not just my current life, but the entire extent of my eternal existence. The other beings formed a circle around us, creating an environment of welcome and total understanding. Each of them radiated a unique frequency of love and wisdom, and together they formed a symphony of energy that made me feel completely at home. At that moment, all earthly worries and fears dissolved. I understood that death, which we fear so much on earth, is nothing more than an illusion, a simple transition to a much higher and more real state of existence. These beings showed me that our true nature is eternal, and that we are all connected on a much deeper level than we can imagine in our earthly experience. With a simple gesture, the main being of light began what would become the most profound and revealing part of my experience, the review of my life. It wasn't like watching a movie. It was much more intense and multidimensional. Every moment of my existence was not just relived, but experienced in its entirety, including the thoughts, emotions, and impacts my actions had on others. I saw again the boy I was running through the fields of California, dreaming of being a firefighter. I relived every rescue I performed, but this time I could feel not only my own courage and determination, but also the fear and gratitude of those I saved. Most impressively, I could see how each choice I made created ripples of influence that extended far beyond the immediate moment. A simple act of kindness I performed decades ago had triggered a series of positive events that continue to affect people to this day. Likewise, times when I acted selfishly or angry also revealed their far-reaching consequences. However, there was no judgment in this review, just understanding and learning. The beings of light showed me that each experience, positive or negative, had contributed to my spiritual growth. The most surprising thing was realizing that there were no coincidences in my life. Every meeting, every decision, every moment of joy or sadness was part of a bigger plan that I was only now beginning to understand. It was as if each piece of the puzzle of my existence finally fell into place, revealing a pattern of beauty and meaning that transcended my previous understanding. During my experience with the beings of light, I received profound revelations about the nature of reality that completely transformed my understanding of existence. They showed me that the universe is infinitely larger and more complex than we can imagine from our limited earthly perspective. Each revelation was accompanied by an understanding so clear and profound that it seemed to have always been there, just waiting to be discovered. I learned that each of us is a unique expression of the divine, temporarily incarnated in physical form to learn and evolve. Death, they explained to me, is not an end, but a transformation, like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. I understood that time, as we know it, is an illusion created for our earthly experience. In the highest reality, past, present, and future exist simultaneously. I saw that all religions and spiritual beliefs contain fragments of truth, but none capture the entirety of divine reality. Love, I was shown, is not just a feeling. It is the fundamental force that holds the entire universe together. Every thought, every emotion, every action has an impact on the fabric of reality. Nothing is lost. Nothing is forgotten. I learned that our true nature is much vaster and more powerful than we imagine, and that we carry within us a spark of divine light itself. These revelations did not come in the form of words or concepts, but as direct, undeniable truths, imprinted on my soul with crystal clarity. The understanding I received in those moments was so profound and transformative that I knew my life would never be the same after I returned. While immersed in that state of infinite understanding and love, the main being of light approached again. With infinite kindness, but also firmly, he informed me that it was not yet my time to remain in that dimension. There was an important mission I needed to fulfill on Earth. I protested vehemently. How could I return after experiencing such fullness? How could I return to the limitation of physical existence after knowing this greater truth? The being smiled with understanding and love, and showed me visions of the future, people I would still help, lives that would be touched by my experience, transformations that would occur through my testimony. I saw that my return would not just be for me, but for all those who needed to hear about the reality beyond death. With tremendous clarity, I understood that each person who crossed my path upon my return would not be by chance. Each encounter would have a greater purpose. The decision to return was not easy. The love and peace I felt in that dimension were indescribable, and the idea of leaving that state of grace seemed almost unbearable. However, the being of light showed me that I would return different, with a clearer purpose and a deeper understanding of life. He assured me that even though I returned to the physical world, I would never completely lose connection with this higher reality. You will carry this light within you, he told me wordlessly, and it will guide you through the rest of your earthly journey. Your experience will serve as a beacon to those who live in the shadows of the fear of death. The images he showed me of the future were not just of people being comforted by my testimony, but of true transformations of consciousness happening through sharing this experience. With this understanding, I accepted the return, although part of me still longed to remain in that state of infinite grace. It was as if I was accepting a sacred mission, not out of obligation, but out of a deep sense of purpose and love for those who had yet to understand these greater truths. The process of returning to the physical body was intense and, in certain aspects, traumatic. It was like being compressed back into a very limited form after experiencing total freedom. The first sensation was pain, intense and overwhelming. My body, which had been on the brink of death, was still fighting the infection that had almost taken me. The sounds of the hospital gradually returned, the beeping of heart monitors, the voices of healthcare professionals, the noise of equipment. Each sound seemed harsh and artificial compared to the perfect harmony he had experienced on the other plane. I slowly opened my eyes, and the artificial light in the room seemed harsh and unnatural compared to the soft, vivid light I had experienced. The medical team was surprised by my sudden recovery. Vital signs, which were critical, began to stabilize in an inexplicable way. It was as if my body had found new strength, a new reason to fight. In the days that followed, my physical recovery surprised all the health professionals involved in my case. At the same time, my mind and spirit were undergoing an even deeper transformation. It was like I was seeing the world through new eyes. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment became precious in a way it had never been before. Colors seemed more vibrant, sounds more meaningful, and connections with others much deeper. The years following my near-death experience were marked by a profound transformation in every aspect of my life. I returned to work as a firefighter, but with a new perspective on life and death. Each rescue, each emergency began to have a deeper meaning. It was no longer just about saving physical lives, but about understanding the greater purpose of each encounter, each moment. I began to share my experience with others, at first hesitantly, then with more confidence as I saw the impact my story had on people. I saw tears of relief in the eyes of people who had lost loved ones when I told them about the continuity of life beyond death. I watched the fear of death transform into understanding and acceptance. My relationship with spirituality has completely changed. I could no longer fit into any specific religion, as I had experienced something that transcended them all. I have come to see all spiritual traditions as different paths leading to the same universal truth. My marriage with Sarah has grown stronger as she has witnessed my transformation and supported my new life mission. Today, 30 years after that life-changing experience, I continue to share my story with anyone who is ready to listen. I'm no longer afraid of death. I know that when my time comes, it will just be a return home. Each day is an opportunity to live with the purpose I discovered in that dimension of light and love, and to help others understand that death is not the end, but just a transition to something much greater and more beautiful than we can imagine. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.